Have you ever been in a situation where no matter how logical, calm, or valid your point was, no one was listening? You're in a meeting, you're making sense, you're trying to stay composed, but the louder voice wins. The one who interrupts more, the one who talks over everyone else. And you think, what's the point of even trying? Imagine this. You're in the middle of a team meeting at work. A deadline was missed, not because of you, but your boss singles you out anyway. She raises her voice. She's frustrated. Everyone in the room turns to look at you, and your heart starts pounding. You want to defend yourself. You want to shout back, but you also know that would make you look defensive, and worse, emotional. Now pause that moment. What if instead of yelling back, or going silent, you calmly looked her in the eye and said, "I don't need to raise my voice to be right." Not a scream, not sarcasm, just that one sentence, steady, grounded, and clear. What happens next? The room goes quiet. People look at you differently. And for the first time, your words carry more weight than the noise around them. In today's world, where shouting is often mistaken for strength and silence is seen as weakness, there's another path. A smarter one. A Stoic one. Because true power doesn't scream. True power doesn't need to dominate the room. It holds its ground without losing its calm. Today, I'll show you 5 powerful Stoic responses that can silence anyone, not through aggression, but through composure, clarity, and inner control. You can use them in an argument at work, with family, in public, or even in your closest relationships. These are not comebacks, they're not insults. They're boundaries made of steel, wrapped in velvet. And pay close attention, because number 3, if used right, can completely disarm someone who's trying to manipulate or overpower you. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Everyone has experienced that moment of frustration, when you're calm, but someone else is not. When you're clear, but they're louder. When you're trying to communicate, but they just want to win. And the worst part? They might actually win the argument, not because they're right, but because they overpowered you emotionally. But that's not real power. Real power is this: saying just a few words, softly, and watching the storm quiet down. Not because you silenced someone, but because your presence made their chaos feel out of place. That's what the ancient Stoics taught, thousands of years ago, and today, their wisdom is more necessary than ever. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through 5 smart, respectful, and deeply powerful responses. You'll hear why they work, how to say them, and when to use them. Each one is grounded in ancient Stoic philosophy, used by warriors, emperors, slaves, and teachers. And today, they can be used by you. Let's get started with the first response. Picture this. You're sitting in a Monday morning team meeting. The air is tense. The project deadline was missed last week, and the boss is already in a bad mood. You know the delay wasn't your fault. The files from another department came late. Still, your name is brought up. She slams the table. She raises her voice. And suddenly, you become the center of attention. You were supposed to update the client before Friday, she barks. You open your mouth to explain, but she cuts you off. No excuses. We needed that done. All eyes are on you. You feel the weight of every glance. Your heart races. The logical side of your brain screams, "This isn't fair!" But another part, the older, wiser part, remembers something powerful. You take a breath. You look her in the eye, and you say, "I don't need to raise my voice to be right." That sentence doesn't come with thunder. It comes with thunderous calm. And just like that, the room changes. Why does it work? Because in that moment, you do something most people can't. You don't play their game. You don't match chaos with chaos. You respond, not react. This phrase is more than just a clever line. It's a boundary. It sends a message. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to dominate. I'm here to stand on truth, and I don't need to shout to prove it. The Stoics, especially Epictetus, taught this clearly. He who cannot control his tongue will be a slave to his emotions. Most people don't raise their voice because they're right. They raise it because they feel like they're losing. When someone yells, they're trying to regain control, not through reason, but through force. And when you refuse to engage at that level, you quietly take back the power. Let's break it down. Here's when to use this phrase. In meetings where tension is high. In relationships where someone gets aggressive. On the street, in public when someone is trying to provoke a reaction. Here's how to say it. Calmly, no sarcasm. With eye contact. As a full stop, not an opening to argue more. Here's what it does. It interrupts the emotional escalation. It forces the other person, and the people watching, to reevaluate their tone. It gives you dignity, authority, and clarity without confrontation. A real-world example. Let me tell you about Eric, a high school teacher in Detroit. He had a student, Marcus, who was struggling at home, lashing out in class. One day, Marcus yelled at him in the middle of class. "You don't care about us. You're just here for a paycheck." The class gasped. Everyone expected Eric to blow up. Instead, he waited. He didn't flinch. Then he replied, calmly, "I don't need to raise my voice to be right." That moment, something shifted. Marcus didn't say another word. The class went quiet, and the energy, it transformed. Eric didn't win by overpowering. He won by anchoring. By showing that real strength doesn't have to roar. The deeper lesson. In today's world, loudness often gets mistaken for leadership. People who shout the most get the most attention. But attention isn't respect. Noise isn't clarity, and dominance isn't wisdom. Stoicism teaches us power isn't in volume, it's in control. This phrase is for those who choose poise over panic, precision over provocation, presence over volume. When you say, "I don't need to raise my voice to be right," you remind the world of a simple truth. Still waters run deep. And the calmest person in the room usually holds the most power. Let's say you're at a family dinner. It's been going well until your cousin, the one who always has a smug grin and a sarcastic tone, starts in on you. "Oh, you're still doing that little online business thing?" he says with a chuckle loud enough for the whole table to hear. Everyone turns their heads. You know this game. He loves the jabs, especially when there's an audience. You've taken the bait before, snapping back, defending yourself, trying to explain why what you do matters. But not tonight. You sip your water, you breathe, and then, softly, you say, "The way you speak says more about you than it does about me." Silence. No comeback, no escalation. Just stillness. Your words hang in the air like a mirror. He laughs nervously, others shift in their seats. And for the first time, your cousin looks smaller, not because you attacked him, but because you didn't. Why does this phrase work? Because it shifts the focus back to them. Most people who mock, insult, or use sarcasm in front of others aren't trying to be funny. They're trying to prove superiority. But when you refuse to play the game, when you simply reflect the energy back to them, they're left exposed. This phrase is not a weapon. It's a reflection. No name-calling. No over-explaining. No giving them the reaction they want. Just one calm truth. Your words say more about your character than they do about mine. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This phrase is the perfect embodiment of that wisdom. When someone insults you, their real message isn't about you, it's about them. Their insecurity, their need for control, their fear of irrelevance. And by not reacting, you expose all of it without saying another word. When to use it. When someone mocks your work or lifestyle. When you're belittled in public. When a passive-aggressive person makes a cutting comment. But here's the key. Tone matters. This phrase must be said with serenity, not sarcasm. Say it with calm, and it becomes powerful. Say it with edge, and it becomes a challenge. Real-world scenario. Meet Rachel, a project manager in Chicago. In a stakeholder meeting, a senior executive rolled his eyes while she was presenting. Then, under his breath, but loud enough for others to hear, he muttered, "She clearly rehearsed this all night. How cute." Laughter from the back of the room. It stung. But Rachel didn't flinch. She turned to him and said, "The way you speak says more about you than it does about me." Just like that, the tone of the room changed. What was once a joke at her expense became an awkward moment for him. After the meeting, multiple team members privately thanked her. She didn't humiliate him. She didn't defend herself. She just held up a mirror. And in doing so, she reclaimed her dignity and the respect of the room. The deeper power. You see, in Stoicism, dignity is more powerful than dominance. Seneca wrote, "To speak in anger is like shooting an arrow without aiming." This phrase prevents that. It stops you from becoming the person who wounds others just because you're wounded. It also trains others how to speak to you by making them aware of how they sound. People often repeat patterns until someone disrupts them. And nothing disrupts like calm accountability. Final thought. When you say, "The way you speak says more about you than it does about me," you are doing something rare. You're not defending your ego. You're not proving your worth. You're simply standing still while others trip over their own hostility. And in that stillness, you gain something they don't expect. Control of the moment. Respect from the room. Peace for yourself. That's not just stoic. That's mastery. It's late. You've just walked through the front door after a long day at work. You're exhausted, mentally drained. All you want is 10 minutes of silence and maybe a warm shower. Instead, what you get is your partner standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, tone sharp. "Why haven't you answered my texts all day? Are you avoiding me again?" The volume's up. The accusations fly. There's no room to breathe, just tension. You try to explain, but the words keep bouncing off a wall of frustration. Every sentence you say is twisted. Every calm attempt turns into fuel for more fire. You feel the anger rising in you, slow but steady. And just when your emotions are ready to take the wheel, you stop. You exhale. And you say, "Let's talk when we can do it respectfully." Then you walk away. Not storming out. Not slamming doors. Just stepping out of the fire. Why it works. This phrase is more than a timeout. It's a reset, a line in the sand that says, "I'm here to talk, but not like this. I'm open, but I won't be attacked. I value this conversation, but only if it's respectful." And that's a powerful stance. Because in today's emotional culture, people often confuse volume with value. They think if they care deeply, they must express it explosively. But deep care without emotional regulation turns love into intimidation, passion into pressure. Epictetus, the great Stoic teacher, once said, "You cannot control what others do, but you can control what you accept." This phrase is exactly that. You are not trying to control the other person. You're simply stating what you're willing to participate in. When to use it? In romantic relationships, when things are getting heated. With a boss who's lost their temper. With a friend who keeps cutting you off. With anyone who thinks yelling equals communication. And yes, it may not always go over well in the moment. They might accuse you of walking away or not caring. But over time, your consistency becomes your boundary. And that boundary teaches people how to treat you. Real-world scenario. Here's the story of Jason, a team leader at a marketing firm in Dallas. He had a colleague, Amira, who would interrupt and dominate every strategy meeting. She would raise her voice, correct people mid-sentence, and dismiss ideas with sarcasm. At first, Jason tried to out-talk her. Then he tried going silent. Nothing worked. One day, during another combative meeting, she cut him off for the third time. He paused, looked her in the eye, and calmly said, "Let's talk when we can do it respectfully." Then he turned back to his notebook. Not angry. Just done, for now. Amira froze. The room shifted. The energy softened. Later that day, she apologized. They talked like adults, for the first time. The psychology behind it. This phrase works because it triggers self-awareness. It's not a threat. It's not passive-aggressive. It's simply holding up a mirror to say, "This is not a healthy space to communicate. Let's try again later." It also empowers you. You no longer have to sit through verbal attacks, repeated interruptions, emotional outbursts masked as conversation. You're allowed to say, "Not like this." And that's not weak, that's wise. A Stoic perspective. Stoicism isn't about being silent in the face of abuse. It's about knowing when to engage and when to protect your energy. Seneca wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." In today's world, to pause a toxic conversation, to refuse to participate in chaos, that is an act of courage. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't have to match their chaos to prove you care. Final thought. When you say "let's talk" when we can do it respectfully, you're not ending the conversation forever. You're elevating it. You're saying, "This discussion matters to me, but I refuse to have it in a way that destroys both of us." And people remember that. They remember the person who didn't explode. They remember the one who walked away not to escape, but to protect something sacred. Their calm, their clarity, and their self-respect. That's not just a phrase. It's a life skill. And it changes everything. You're sitting across from someone you used to love. The cafe is quiet, but your heart isn't. It's been months since the breakup. They asked to meet just to talk. And here you are, half of you hoping for closure, the other half bracing for damage. It starts off civil, then it turns. Accusations sneak in. Blame dressed up as curiosity. And just like that, the old patterns come rushing back. You never really cared, did you? I gave everything, and you just walked away. You feel it, the tension, the guilt trip, the manipulation. You've been here before, you know how this ends. But this time, something in you is different. Not colder, clearer. You lean back, take a breath and say, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation." Then you gather your things and leave. No drama, no last word, just peace. Why this phrase is so powerful? Because in a world that constantly pressures you to explain, to justify, to respond, this phrase gives you something rare: permission to walk away. And not as an act of defeat, but of strength. It's a declaration that says, "This no longer serves me. I'm not here to be punished. I choose peace over performance." Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." This phrase is that quote in action. You're not denying what's being said. You're simply declaring, "I'm not staying in this energy any longer." When to use it? When a conversation turns into a cycle of blame. When someone won't let go of old wounds. When you realize you're being emotionally baited. When logic has left the room and only chaos remains. But what if they say you're running away? They might. Because when you remove yourself from a fight, it disarms the fighter. And some people only feel powerful when they can keep you in the ring. But remember, walking away is not weakness, it's wisdom. You're not abandoning the person, you're refusing to abandon yourself. Real-world example. Meet Andrea, a young lawyer in Atlanta. She had a best friend, Cynthia, who had become increasingly toxic over the years. Every time they talked, Cynthia found a way to make Andrea feel guilty. "You're too busy now. You've changed. You only call when you need something." At first, Andrea tried harder, called more, explained herself, but nothing was ever enough. One day, during yet another phone call full of passive aggression, Andrea paused. Then, in the calmest voice she'd ever used, she said, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation." And she hung up. She cried after. She questioned herself. But then, something unexpected happened. She felt free. That phone call didn't end a friendship. It ended a pattern. And it started something better. Self-respect. What this phrase teaches others. It teaches them that your time is valuable. That not every conversation is owed. That your silence is not a weakness. It's a boundary. Some people will never change how they speak until they lose access to your attention. From a Stoic lens, Stoicism teaches not just how to endure, but how to exit what harms you. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Saying I'd prefer not to continue this conversation is a moment of mastery. It's refusing to let someone else control your energy, your peace, your mental space. And it's not about winning the argument. It's about protecting the part of you that's tired of fighting the same war. Final thought. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can say is nothing more than, "I'm done." Not in anger, not in bitterness. Just done, with conversations that go nowhere, with people who confuse love with control, with dynamics that drain instead of restore. When you say, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation," you're not slamming the door. You're closing it gently and locking it with grace. That's not a retreat. It's a return to yourself. It's Sunday dinner. You're at your parents' house, roast chicken on the table, football on the TV in the background, and that familiar sense of being 12 years old again. Except now, you're 32. You've lived on your own for years. You've made choices, real ones, hard ones. But your parents still talk to you like they know what's best. You should go back to grad school, get a real degree. You're wasting time with that art stuff. Someday you'll understand what responsibility really means. It's not cruel. It's not loud. It's coated in concern, drenched in love. But it still stings. You want to explain, you want to defend, you want them to see you. But instead, you place your fork down. You look at them, not with anger, but with calm. And you say, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it." Silence. And something rare happens. They stop. They don't fight. They don't push. Because this time, you didn't come with rebellion. You came with resolve. Why this phrase works? Because it creates space. Space for someone else to have their belief. Space for you to have yours. And space between disagreement and disrespect. In a world obsessed with winning arguments, this phrase does something radical. It ends the fight before it begins. You're not saying they're wrong. You're saying you're not required to agree. That's a boundary most people never learn to build, especially with family, with authority figures, or with people we love. But boundaries don't ruin relationships. They protect them. Seneca once said, "To be a slave to the opinion of others is the worst of all prisons." And that's exactly what this phrase frees you from. Not just their opinion, but the emotional pressure to absorb it, adopt it, or apologize for not matching it. When to use it? When someone close to you insists their way is the only way. When colleagues try to correct your values. When you're in a group where conformity is the unspoken rule. This phrase is a soft no, but a firm stand. It doesn't invite debate. It doesn't inflame. It ends with dignity. Real-world example. Let's talk about Malik, a 28-year-old designer in San Diego. His parents wanted him to work in finance. They believed design was a hobby, not a career. Every call ended in frustration, guilt, shame. Until one day, after listening to another 20-minute monologue about growing up, Malik took a breath and said, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it." That was it. No shouting, no defense, just that. His parents didn't celebrate his choice that day, but for the first time, they stopped trying to change it. And Malik? He felt like a man, not a son asking for approval. What it teaches others. It teaches them. You're willing to listen, but not to conform. You can disagree without disrespect. You don't need validation to be confident. That's emotional maturity. And it's rare. Because most people fall into one of two traps. 1. Aggressive defiance. You don't know anything. 2. Passive submission. Okay, maybe you're right. This phrase is the middle path. Stoic, clear, adult. From a Stoic perspective, this is the power of internal sovereignty. Epictetus reminded us, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. You can't control people's beliefs, but you can control whether you surrender to them. And when you don't, when you stand still in the face of pressure, you show the world what calm confidence looks like. Final thought. When you say, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it," you're not building a wall. You're building a door with a lock on your side. It can open, it can close, but it's your decision. You're not rejecting people. You're reclaiming your mind, your path, your right to disagree, and still love, still respect, still belong. And that, more than anything, is what Stoicism is about. Not about winning, not about convincing, but about being free, even in a room full of expectations. You've heard the phrases, you've imagined the scenes. And maybe, deep down, a part of you is thinking, will this really work? Can a few calm words really silence the noise? Here's the truth. These phrases don't give you control over others. They give you control over yourself. And that's where all real power begins. Think back to each moment we explored. When you calmly said, "I don't need to raise my voice to be right," and the chaos around you paused. When you deflected an insult with, "The way you speak says more about you than it does about me," and watched their arrogance dissolve. When you refused to argue and said, "Let's talk when we can do it respectfully," protecting the dignity of both people. When you walked away from manipulation with, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation." And when you held your ground with love, saying, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it." None of these moments were loud, but all of them were loud in impact. What happens when you use these phrases? You become different. Not reactive, not defensive, not afraid to speak, but never needing to shout. You begin to carry yourself with a kind of stillness that others feel, even before you speak. You start to notice how rarely people actually control their own emotions, and how refreshing it is when someone does. You shift from trying to win arguments to building unshakable boundaries. And slowly people respond to that energy. They speak to you more carefully. They listen more intently. They respect you, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. The ripple effect. These aren't just tools for self-defense. They're tools for cultural change. Imagine a workplace where one person holds their ground calmly, and others begin to mirror it. Imagine a family where shouting isn't the default, because one person showed there's another way. Imagine a generation that learns conflict doesn't have to mean combat. It starts with one person, and that person can be you. Stoicism isn't just ancient philosophy. It's not about wearing a toga or quoting Latin. It's about this. In a noisy world, your silence is rare. In a reactive world, your calm is powerful. In a chaotic world, your clarity is revolutionary. And when you begin to speak from that place of calm strength, not always, not perfectly, but consistently, you become unforgettable. Not because you overpowered, but because you stood still while others lost their footing. And the best part? You don't need anyone's permission to do this. You don't need a special title or a perfect past or a voice that commands attention. You just need the courage to pause, to breathe, to speak with presence, not pressure. One final reflection. The people who leave the biggest impact on us aren't always the loudest. They're the ones who made us feel safe, seen, and small in our anger. They didn't crush us with words. They opened our eyes with composure. You now have 5 of those phrases. Use them, not to dominate, but to elevate. Not to silence others, but to bring silence to the noise. And remember, respect isn't forced. It's felt. And it's earned, not by volume, but by presence.